Hello, English learners, and welcome. I'm your host, Paul. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Excited to chat about English learning today.
All right, so let's talk about something that probably bugs a ton of you learning English out there. You know, when you can understand a lot, like movies, podcasts, even regular conversations. But then, when it's your turn to speak, bam, it's like hitting a wall.
Oh, yeah, that's super common. You're definitely not alone. And it can be so frustrating, right? Like you get all this input, but actually producing the language feels impossible.
Totally. So that's exactly what we're going to dig into today, help you guys figure out why this happens and what you can do about it. First off, why is speaking so much harder than just getting what you hear or read?
Okay, picture this. You're learning piano, right? You listen to amazing pianists for hours, you feel the music, you understand how it works. But does that mean you can suddenly play like them? Nope. Understanding is like watching, speaking is like actually training your uh, language muscles, so to speak.
That's a really good way to put it. So, like, listening is being at the concert, but speaking is actually being the one playing. And like any instrument, it takes practice to get those muscles working together. Now, a lot of you learners, you get stuck translating everything in your head right, thinking in your native language, then trying to convert it to English before you even open your mouth. What's your take on how that affects things?
Oh, it's a huge roadblock. Imagine trying to have a smooth conversation, but you're constantly looking up words in a dictionary. It makes you slow, hesitant, and the English just doesn't sound natural at all.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Mm.
So if translating is such a bad habit, how do you actually break free from it?
One of the best things you can do is start thinking in English. Sounds simple, but it's a real shift in how your brain handles the language.
Wait, so you're saying I should try to form my thoughts in English directly, like right there in my head?
Yep, exactly. Instead of treating English like some code you gotta decipher, then re-encode, you gotta internalize it, make it the natural way you think.
Okay, I get that. That's the goal. But how do you actually make that happen? It's not like flipping a switch.
It's a process for sure, but you can create an immersion environment even if you don't live in an English-speaking country. Surround yourself with English as much as possible.
Right, so like listening to English music, watching movies and shows, reading English books, even changing the language on your phone.
Exactly. The more you hear and see English, the less you'll rely on translation. English phrases will start popping into your head naturally. You're basically building this mental library of English.
So immersion kind of rewires your brain to think in English, huh? But being real, this takes a lot of effort and time, right?
It does, no question. But even small steps done consistently make a huge difference. Think of it as building a habit, not cramming for a test.
Okay, consistency is key. Now, besides thinking in English, what are some other big challenges people face when they actually try to speak?
A big one is fear, plain and simple. Fear of making mistakes. It can be so strong that people just avoid speaking altogether.
Oh yeah, totally. Like you're scared of sounding dumb, making grammar errors, not being understood.
Yeah.
That's got to be super common. So how do you get over that?
First thing, remember, everybody makes mistakes. It's part of the learning process. Even native speakers mess up sometimes.
That's true. It's easy to forget that when you're nervous.
For sure. So you got to change how you think about mistakes. See them as learning opportunities, not failures. Every mistake is a chance to get better at pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary.
Like instead of freaking out, you got to be like, okay, what can I learn from this?
Exactly. Embrace the mistakes, figure out why they happen, and keep moving forward.
Great advice. Now, besides just practicing and not being scared of messing up, are there specific techniques to get better at speaking?
Oh, yeah, definitely. One I really like is called shadowing.
Shadowing. Okay, I've heard of that, but what exactly does it involve?
So basically, you listen to a native English speaker, like in a podcast, movie, whatever, and you try to repeat exactly what they're saying almost at the same time. You're like their vocal shadow.
So you're copying their pronunciation, their intonation, the rhythm of their speech, like a real-time vocal workout.
Yeah, exactly. It helps your pronunciation, you get comfortable with the flow of English, and you even pick up new words and phrases.
So I could put on a podcast to just try to talk along with them.
Exactly. Pick something you enjoy and try to match their pronunciation, intonation, everything.
Cool, that sounds pretty fun, actually. Any tips to make shadowing even more effective?
Yeah, start with shorter segments. Don't go for a whole movie right away. Maybe a minute or two, then gradually make them longer.
Okay, start small, build up from there. What else?
Really pay attention to how the speaker is talking. Where do they put emphasis in a sentence? How does their tone go up and down? Mimic all those little details.
Got it. The more you pay attention to those details, the more natural your own English will sound. The shadowing thing sounds really useful. I'm going to try it out.
You should. It's a really effective way to boost fluency.
So we've talked about thinking in English, not being afraid of mistakes, and shadowing. Any other tips for building confidence, especially in the early stages?
Don't underestimate the power of simple phrases.
Like, hello, how are you? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, those basic interactions, they seem simple, but they're the building blocks of conversations. Mastering them gives you a foundation to feel more confident.
Right, so it's like having those basic tools you could always rely on.
Exactly. Practice those phrases until they become second nature. Don't just know them, own them, make them part of how you speak without thinking.
So those everyday phrases, practice them until they're automatic. What about making the most of practice in general?
Record yourself speaking English.
Like just talking into my phone. I usually just use that for reminders, haha.
Try using it for practice. Talk about a topic you like, describe your day, read something aloud. Then listen back and pay attention. How's your pronunciation? How smooth are you? How clear are you?
That's actually a really good idea. It's like having a personal language coach giving you feedback.
Exactly. And you'll notice things you didn't realize you were doing.
What specifically should I be listening for when I review those recordings?
First, your pronunciation. Are you saying things clearly and correctly? If you hear words that always sound off, focus on practicing those specific sounds.
So pinpoint those tricky sounds and work on them separately.
Got it.
Anything else?
How smooth is your speaking? Are there lots of pauses and ums and uhs? If so, practice speaking in longer chunks until it sounds more natural.
So identify where I get stuck and practice those parts specifically. Makes sense.
And don't be afraid to experiment with your voice. Try different intonations, speed, ways of expressing yourself. Find what feels good and natural for you.
The more you experiment, the more confident and expressive you'll become. This is all really helpful.
I'm glad to hear that. Remember, consistency is key. Even a few minutes of practice each day makes a huge difference. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk about some important words we've been using.
Good idea. Building vocabulary is super important. Let's start with fluent. Everyone wants to be fluent, but what does that really mean?
Fluency means being able to communicate your ideas smoothly without constantly searching for words. It's about feeling comfortable expressing yourself in real-time conversations. So it's not just knowing a ton of words, it's using them effectively and naturally.
It's that feeling of the language just flowing without overthinking every word or grammar rule.
Exactly. And fluency is a journey, not a destination. It's an ongoing process of learning and getting better.
This has been super insightful. We've talked about thinking in English, overcoming fear, shadowing, so much good stuff.
It's all about giving you guys the tools you need. And remember, the most important thing is to enjoy the process. Learning English should be rewarding and fun. Find what works for you and keep practicing consistently.
Great advice. We'll be back soon to dig even deeper into boosting your speaking skills. Until then, keep those words flowing.
Welcome back. We're continuing our exploration today. Remember last time we talked about some really important stuff, like trying to think directly in English and not letting mistakes freak you out.
Yeah, and we even touched on some cool techniques like shadowing.
Exactly. I hope you guys try that out. It can really change how you speak. But today I want to go a bit deeper into the why. Like, why is speaking so hard sometimes? Understanding a little bit about how your brain works can actually help you get better.
Brain science, huh? This is getting interesting.
So learning a new language, it's not just memorizing words and grammar. You're actually changing your brain, rewiring it to deal with this new language.
Rewiring our brains. Sounds kind of intense.
It's not as crazy as it sounds. Your brain has these networks of neurons, and when you learn something new, you're strengthening connections or making new pathways between those neurons.
So it's like building new roads in your brain,
Yeah.
connecting the parts that handle words, grammar, and sounds.
Exactly. And when it comes to speaking, there's a part of your brain called Broca's area. It's super important for producing speech.
So that's where our thoughts turn into spoken words.
Yep, that's the one. And here's the thing. Broca's area needs to be trained specifically for the language you're learning. Just understanding English isn't enough.
Makes sense. So even if I can't understand spoken English, my brain still needs to practice actually making the sounds and forming sentences.
Right. Think of it like baking a cake. You might have all the ingredients, but you also need the recipe and practice to actually bake it. Same with speaking, you need knowledge and practice.
I love that analogy. So we got to train our brains to bake spoken English. But sometimes there's this mental block, right? Like your brain knows the words, but your mouth just won't say them.
Oh, definitely. And that's where the psychology of language learning comes in. It's not just about the physical act of speaking, it's also about overcoming those mental barriers.
What kind of mental barriers?
One of the biggest is fear of judgment. You're scared of making mistakes, sounding silly, not being understood.
That's so real. I think that fear holds a lot of people back from actually speaking.
And here's the thing. Those fears are usually way worse in your head than in reality. We're much harder on ourselves than other people are.
It's true. We overthink every little mistake, and it makes speaking feel terrifying.
To get over that, you need to change your perspective. Be kinder to yourself and see mistakes as part of learning, not as failures.
So give yourself permission to mess up and just accept that it's part of the process.
Like a baby learning to walk, they fall down all the time, but they don't give up. They keep trying, and eventually they're running around. You need that same resilience and self-compassion.
Celebrate those little victories.
Yeah.
Every time you push yourself to speak, that's a win, even if it's not perfect.
The more you practice, the more confident you become, and the less power those fears will have over you.
So we've talked about training your brain and overcoming those mental blocks. Are there any techniques that actually help you speak more smoothly?
Absolutely. One that's really effective, especially if you tend to hesitate when speaking, is called chunking.
Chunking. Okay, what's that?
It's breaking down long sentences into smaller, manageable pieces or chunks. Instead of trying to say a whole sentence at once, you focus on those smaller parts first.
So instead of saying, I would like to order a cup of coffee, please, all at once, you'd break it into like, I would like to, then order a cup of coffee, then please.
Exactly. You're creating little building blocks like Legos, and then you put them together to form the complete sentence.
That's a great way to explain it. And by focusing on smaller chunks, it feels less overwhelming and you speak more smoothly.
You got it. It helps reduce the mental overload and makes speaking less scary.
And the more you practice with those chunks, the easier it becomes to connect them into longer, more natural sentences. This is especially good for people who are intimidated by speaking full sentences right away.
Absolutely. It's all about building confidence gradually.
So, chunking, got it. I know there's another technique you really like, shadowing.
Ah, yes, shadowing. This is a powerful tool. It helps your pronunciation, intonation, everything. We talked about it before, but can you remind everyone how it works?
Sure, basically you find some audio or video in English with a native speaker. Then you listen and try to speak along with them, copying everything as closely as you can.
Exactly. It's like you're their shadow, trying to match their every sound.
And the key is to really focus on the details. How do they pronounce each word? Where do they put emphasis? How does their tone change? You're not just repeating words, you're mimicking their whole way of speaking.
Precisely. The more you pay attention to those details, the more natural your English will sound.
This shadowing thing sounds really cool. Any tips for making it work even better?
Choose material that's a little challenging, but not too hard. You want to push yourself, but still be able to understand what you're shadowing.
So, something that stretches my skills but doesn't make me feel lost. Okay, what else?
Break the material into smaller chunks, like we talked about before. Don't try to do a whole movie at once. Start with a few sentences, then gradually increase the length.
Start small, build up gradually. That seems to be a recurring theme in language learning.
It really is. And don't be afraid to record yourself while you're shadowing. Listening back can help you identify areas to improve.
That's a great tip. It's like getting personalized feedback.
Exactly. The more you shadow, the more you'll internalize the natural sounds and rhythms of English, and your own speaking will become more fluent and natural.
This has been super helpful. I'm feeling motivated to start practicing, but I know for a lot of people, actually speaking in real-life situations is still super scary.
Definitely. Going from practicing alone to talking with others is a big step, but it's also one of the most important steps in learning a language.
So how do we help people bridge that gap from practicing by themselves to speaking confidently in real conversations?
One of the best things you can do is actively create opportunities to speak English in real life. And you don't necessarily have to travel to an English-speaking country. There are ways to do it right where you are.
Give me some examples. How can people create those opportunities?
Think about your hobbies and interests. Are there groups or activities in your community that use English or that have English speakers?
So, like, if I like cooking, I could find an English language cooking class.
Right.
Or if I'm into movies, maybe an English language film discussion group.
Exactly. You're
No.
combining your passions with your language learning. It's about finding those natural contexts where you can practice in a fun way.
That makes so much sense. Connecting your hobbies with your language goals, what other options are there?
The internet is a huge resource. Have you ever considered language exchange apps or websites?
I've heard of them, but haven't really tried them. How do they work?
They're platforms where you connect with other language learners. You find someone who's a native English speaker and wants to learn your language. Then you help each other practice.
So, like, I could find someone who speaks English and wants to learn, say, Spanish, and we could each spend some time speaking in the other person's language.
Exactly. It's a great way to practice with native speakers. You get to help someone else learn. You learn about different cultures. You might even make new friends.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'm definitely checking out those language exchange platforms.
You should. And beyond those, there are also online conversation groups, virtual language cafes, and even online tutoring with English teachers.
So many options. The main takeaway is you don't have to wait until you're perfectly fluent to start speaking.
Absolutely. The sooner you start, even with just a few words, the faster you'll progress. Take those small steps, embrace the mistakes, and find opportunities to interact.
That's so encouraging. Language learning is more like a marathon than a sprint, right?
Exactly. Be patient with yourself, celebrate the small wins, and try to have fun along the way.
This has been incredibly helpful. I'm feeling inspired to keep working on my own speaking skills.
That's great to hear. And remember, you're not alone. There are so many English learners out there facing the same challenges and celebrating the same victories. We'll be back soon with our final thoughts on building speaking confidence. Until then, keep practicing.
Welcome back to our final part. This deep dive has been so insightful, hasn't it?
It really has. We've talked about so much: brain science, speaking techniques, finding opportunities to practice. As we wrap up, I keep thinking about how important your mindset is.
Absolutely. It shapes how you deal with challenges, how you see mistakes, and how you stay motivated over time. It's not just about techniques, it's about believing in yourself and your ability to learn.
Exactly. And one of the biggest things is setting realistic expectations. Learning a new language takes time and effort. It's not a quick fix, it's more like a marathon.
Yeah, you can't expect to be fluent in a few months.
When you set unrealistic goals, you just set yourself up for disappointment. So find that balance between being ambitious and being patient with yourself. You want to challenge yourself, but you also need to be kind to yourself along the way.
And I think it's also important to define what fluency means for you. It's not just about being perfect or sounding like a native speaker. It's about communicating effectively in different situations.
Absolutely. Your fluency goals will be different depending on your reasons for learning English. If you want to travel, you might focus on basic conversations. But if you want to work in English, you'll need more advanced skills.
It's about tailoring your approach to your own needs and goals. And one way to stay positive is to focus on the small victories, those moments of progress you make along the way.
Every time you learn a new word, understand a sentence, or have a successful conversation, that's a win. Celebrate those moments.
It's so easy to get caught up in what you still can't do that you forget to appreciate how far you've already come.
Those small wins keep us motivated and remind us that we're making progress. It's about enjoying the journey, not just focusing on the destination.
Absolutely. And another crucial part of mindset is resilience. There will be times when you feel frustrated or want to give up.
Everyone goes through that. It's normal to hit those rough patches. But the key is to not let them stop you. It's about bouncing back, figuring out what's wrong, and finding ways to overcome those challenges.
So cultivate that inner strength and determination to keep going. And one way to do that is by finding a supportive community.
Surround yourself with other learners who understand what you're going through. They can offer encouragement and keep you accountable.
It's like having your own cheerleading squad. And it's a reminder that we're not alone in this.
Exactly. We're all in this together. And another powerful tool for a positive mindset is gratitude.
Gratitude. How does that apply to language learning?
When you practice gratitude, you focus on what you have, not on what you lack. There's always something to be grateful for in language learning.
Like, we have access to so many amazing resources, online courses, apps, podcasts like this one.
Exactly. Even if you're just starting out, you can be grateful for the opportunity to learn a new language, to connect with different cultures.
It's about appreciating the journey itself, not just the end goal. When you're grateful, you enjoy the process more, stay motivated, and keep going, even when it's hard.
This has been such an inspiring conversation. I hope our listeners are feeling more confident and ready to keep improving their speaking skills.
Me too. And remember, everyone out there, speaking English is a skill you can learn and improve. Practice consistently, Be dedicated and believe in yourself. Don't be afraid of mistakes. See them as chances to grow. And celebrate every victory, big or small.
If you found this helpful, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and share this with anyone else who might benefit.
Until next time, keep learning and keep those words flowing.